encourage your soul, enlighten your mind, and empower your faith. This is the Light Network. If you want to be a serious Bible student, a successful servant, and a powerful preacher, this is the podcast for you. Hello and welcome to Preachers in Training. My name is Robert Hatfield, and this is the podcast where we talk about all things preaching and ministry. Welcome to Season 13, Episode 6 of our podcast, and on today's episode, we're going to be discussing gleanings from reading. How do you organize the gleanings from your reading? We're going to talk research. And I'm looking forward to this practical episode. Here to help me discuss this topic is Steve Miller, who serves here as one of the ministers at the Church of Christ at Gold Hill Road. Steve, it's great to welcome you back.
Good to be here.
And it's an honor to get to work with you here.
Well, it's an honor to get to work with you.
Well,
and thanks for having me on today.
You can also find out more about Steve on his website, stevemillerworldview.com. And that's a pretty neat resource.
Well, thank you.
I want to talk a little bit more about that, either at the beginning or at the end.
Okay.
But maybe we ought to start with that just a minute. SteveMillerWorldview.com is the website there. And there's a lot of different things that, Steve, you have to offer there. Sort of tell us what the goal is, what you're accomplishing on SteveMillerWorldview.com.
Okay. Well...
you didn't know I was going to grill you about this.
I didn't know
Sorry
that was coming up first, so that's okay. That's all right. No, I appreciate you bringing it up. I'm just trying to get everyone's minds focused on looking at everything through the lens of the Bible, through the lens of Jesus, the eyes of God, and whatever topic or subject comes up that we need to look, what does the Bible say about that? Yeah. Is there a principle? Is there a direct command or teaching that I need to obey that way? It also hosts the trending topics, past emails. Yes. I try to just have a log of those so people can go and look back through some things. And it kind of gives a little bit of a highlight, too, of what's been going on in our world, in our country, even in religious thought as well.
So there's a way to sign up for that. The Trending Topics email is just click Trending Topics there. You can type your email address in there and receive those weekly emails.
It's free and comes out every Tuesday, sometime between 3 and 9, we'll say, of that later in the day.
But that is a neat resource. I mean, you're combing through articles. I mean, how many articles do you think you read a week? Hundreds?
Probably at sometimes,
And distilling those down, 5 or 10 links or so in a week in an email. Minimal commentary from you. There is some there.
Yeah.
But wow. And all through that lens of the world, in the name of the worldview lens, which is pretty cool.
Anything that relates to us and how we need to be thinking, things we need to be aware of. And, you're aware of this too. We have a lot of more access at times to things. Maybe not so much more access, but we kind of know a little more what we're needing or looking for. Yeah. And I think that's the goal behind this, is trying to put some things in people's inboxes that, hey, you need to see this. Just be aware of it. And always with the mindset of be discerning. Yeah. Whatever we read, because everything I put in there, there's things you have to, we got to reject that. Yeah. But it's important as we learn to read it that way.
Absolutely. Yeah. And of course, you've done some extensive writing as well. Between Sundays is the book that's out now. There's some other resources that are coming pretty soon, I think, soonish, and all sort of within that niche of worldview, which is pretty cool. So SteveMillerWorldview.com is where to go to find that information, and what a neat resource. Thanks for making that available.
Thanks for sharing that.
Organizing gleanings from your reading. And as I mentioned a minute ago, we're talking about research and some of those habits as well. One of the things, Steve, that I've observed about you over the last year and a half or so that we've worked together is the ability you have, bulletin articles, classes you teach, sermons you preach, to pull from a wealth of reading that you do. I think Trending Topics speaks to that to some degree on a week-to-week basis. But at the same time, I mean, a preacher may come across thousands and thousands of pages over the course of his ministry, or maybe even over the course of a week. It depends on what the week's been like. Organizing those thoughts can be challenging You know, some preachers seem to have a really good memory. Maybe you do. I want to ask you about that in a minute. But, you know, others of us, it's like, well, I think I read that once, but I can't remember from whom. You know, maybe I can chase it down. It takes a long time. And sometimes we can waste a lot of time trying to get to the resources that we need.
We can.
As well. Do you have a system in place, or do you just have a really great memory, or just introductory? How do you classify yourself?
Maybe a mixture.
Yeah?
Obviously, I think there's times I am blessed with being able to remember where certain things are, things I've read, and I'd like to get in a little while share some background to that.
Good. Yeah.
Where that come from and how that developed. I'm going to jump ahead here just a minute. I use Evernote quite a bit.
Okay.
I clip things all the time. But I put a note here this morning. I was thinking more and more about this. I thought, I screenshot. What a neat blessing we have to be able to do that. So, you know, sometimes it's a slide I'll screenshot, or a picture of a article that I'll go back to later and link to it or read it in depth. So I use that. Tags, you tag a lot.
Yeah.
Now, we're talking today a whole different way than we used to do, right? Used to be we clipped paper.
I don't know how and you had the filing cabinets. Yeah.
You had to get a file folder, label it. And at one time, I had about 12 file cabinets. Now, these are 4 to 5 drawer cabinets.
Wow. Yeah.
They were full.
Yeah.
And then moves happened. Well, then you're like, I'm not moving all this.
Right.
And you dump some. But then the scanning capabilities came along. And so scanned a lot of things you wanted to keep, and you purged other things. And as you know, you have to do that from time to time. Preachers know we have to cull our libraries and files at times. And
that's a task in and of itself.
It is.
You need a librarian to come in and
just
help you
about
with some of that. Yeah.
But you used to I'd have a file, you know, you used to put on your desk, the file holder full, you know, each month. And I'd say, well, I'll file at the end of the month. Or everybody had different
organization
plans.
Is key in this.
It is.
You have to be sort of an organized person and
is.
develop a system that makes sense for you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. So this is great. So many ways that we could go. And you're right. You may read books. You may read newspaper articles. You may read blog posts. You may read online news.
Yes.
Twitter, Facebook sometimes it can yield, as surprising as it is, some good things, good gleanings, right?
Yeah, it can. Yeah.
Especially as more and more preachers, and I'm thinking about guys like Hugh Fulford and others who are posting regular, basically articles on Facebook.
Right.
Which is neat.
It is.
So there's to your point, a wealth of information there.
A lot.
Take us back to some of your roots, if you don't mind, and so the background that you had. I mean, based on what we've talked about previously, it seems like this has sort of been a lifelong adventure for you to some degree.
It's turned out that way. Yeah. So I've always loved, you know, I guess digging deeper. And I'm going to bring up you'll think this is funny because you know it relates to me, but a country music example, right? We got to bring in the music.
Absolutely.
Right? So growing up, you know, and I found this with a lot of my friends that were in that same mindset, loving the music, that you'd have a favorite band or a musician, and here's a recording. When was this recorded? Where was it recorded? Who played on the session? And so it takes you into this deeper layer that you don't just find on an old album cover or a CD cover, you know. And so you start learning and reading, and you find out these things. And that was always exciting to me, to find out some background behind it.
Okay.
And you'd find tidbits of really neat history, you know.
Sort of flavors the way you listen to it later, right?
It really does.
Yeah.
It really does. Like, if you find out, well, who's playing the banjo on that? Well, I know his style, and that's cool.
Yeah.
I didn't know he played with them at that time. So just opens up a whole world of that.
Yeah.
Well, then as I got into study and Bible study and preaching and growing that way, a lot of those same characteristics came to play in digging. Because as you know, you read something, I want to find out about that. So we need to, well, what does this word mean?
Yeah.
What does this setting have to do with anything? Well, here's a verse in the Old Testament referring to that. Well, you dig back, and we know it. You can really follow a lot of trails.
Well, and it just brings it to life. Again, the flavor there.
It does.
It really changes the perspective almost.
Yeah, and the connections are just, you almost get giddy sometimes.
Yeah,
you know,
that's
you're
right.
excited that,
Yeah.
wow, this puts a picture together for me. And so that's a little bit of the background. Then I had two preachers that really influenced me. And the first one was Robert Stapleton, and he's passed away a few years ago. But he's the one baptized me. And for a few years, he was our located preacher. But Bob was organized. He had a fine library, and it came out in his lessons and his classes. He really did his research. And so he taught, that influenced me. While I, at that point, didn't work with him, later I did have a summer to work with him.
Oh, that's cool.
Later on. And he had a tremendous work ethic, you know, and that was influential. The other one was Terry Varner in Marietta, Ohio. And so when I was in school in Parkersburg, I would spend a lot of time going over to his house. He was very gracious to let me come over different times. And he would just share things. Just, here's what I'm doing now. Here's what I'm working on. Oh. And he had, and still has, I guess, one of the largest libraries that I've ever known about, a preacher, and a really deep library, you know. And so he taught me everything from, you know, the style of a good pen, the value of a good pen, to paper, to marking things that you find, to filing habits, to taking a book. When you get a new book, you know, don't just look at the table of contents, but does it have a bibliography? Glance over that. Even if you don't read it now, he said, you know, these are things that you'll find that they will come back to you later at times. That, hey, I saw a reference to this in this book, and go back to it. And the value of knowing what you have and using it.
Wow, that's true. So many preachers, especially when you're young, you think, I really got to build my library. You're kind of excited about that.
Right.
And you amass these collections, and you hardly even know what you have.
Right.
And then sometimes you end up just not even hardly using what you've got.
Right.
Because you don't even know what's in there. You know, but you got the covers, you know. There's the potential that's there.
That's right.
But I'm not tapping into it.
Right. And there'll come a time for that. And that's what a lot of people don't really get is, why do you need all these books?
Yeah.
Well, it's for future as well, future research, that you may not have access to something locally that I've got it in my library.
Right. Yeah.
You know?
Well, you're singing the song of so many preachers right now. I can hear them through the headphones here saying amen, you know, as they're driving or doing whatever they're doing right now, which is pretty cool. Speaking of the bibliography thing, as a younger preacher, I was introduced to a lot of really neat resources by reading Wayne Jackson's bibliographies, because I thought, well, these are the people that he quotes a lot.
Yes.
They influenced his thinking.
That's
wow,
right.
I want to read that, you know,
That's right.
in addition to reading him.
Right.
And authors like R.C.H. Linsky, you know, Jackson quotes Linsky all the time.
Right.
I'd never heard of Linsky. And then it turned out where I was working, the church I was working with at the time, they had Linsky in their library, in the church library.
How cool, yeah.
And that was just amazing. So read the bibliographies. It's good stuff.
That's right.
Yeah.
And you bring up a good point that relates to this too, and that's a great illustration. And I've done that with music, bringing that back in, is saying, all right, I like this artist. Who influenced this artist?
Yeah.
And that's really a neat, deep study too.
That's right.
But you're right, with preachers, that's so neat to see. And you grow and you gain and you find out, well, here's where he got this.
Right.
And it opens up a whole new world to you.
Yeah, that's right. And the value of properly citing and that sort of thing too. We talk about avoiding plagiarism from time to time and that sort of thing. And obviously that's important. And we've done episodes on that. Check our archives. But, you know, to also think about it from the perspective of, who can I help? You know, this blessed me. And by citing it down there, either in a sermon, maybe on a slide, or in a book, if I'm writing it, or an article I may be publishing, or a blog post, and having that there, and somebody else might be blessed by reading an extended version of the quote, even beyond what I published.
Yes.
Something like that, which is cool.
Yeah. And that's another driving point.
Yeah.
That you get into. And
to bless another person.
Right. And don't overlook the endnotes and footnotes, right?
Right. Yeah.
And I've known, and as you have, different people that you've read after, you look forward to getting their work, because they're those that put extensive further, see this book, see these books or articles.
The notes are as good as the manuscript is.
Yes. And so here's another line of study I can go down.
That's right. By the way,
exciting.
footnotes are way better than endnotes. Do you agree or disagree?
That's probably a major debatable question.
This is
I'm
trivial.
changing my mind on that a
Are
little
you
bit.
really?
And mainly from writing. That, I think maybe the reader might appreciate this more at the end
Really?
than on the bottom of every
Yeah.
page, depending on your audience.
Yeah. What I hate
Right.
is I basically need a bookmark on the endnotes section because I'm constantly flipping back and forth.
Right,
But
right.
we've also seen these guys and some of the older writings, especially the line will be above half the page.
Oh, yeah.
Between what they wrote and what the notes
Right.
are. So.
Small amount of text, and then all these references.
All these references or quotes or whatever. Yeah,
Yes,
it's pretty cool.
I've seen that lots of times.
So you mentioned those preachers who helped you in building not only appreciating a good library, but then organization of that library.
Yes.
Which is valuable. It is important. It's beyond just giving credit to those who have influenced our thoughts, but also to it means more. I mean, just like when you're writing a paper for high school or college, right? Your teachers want you to cite so many sources, right? To add credibility, in other words.
Right.
And obviously, ultimately, we're citing Scripture as the ultimate credibility. But at the same time, to confirm that maybe our thinking, our logic, or even authenticity, I want to be genuine in citing those who have influenced me. That does mean a lot. I think even for the average listener, the person in the pew who's listening to us preaching, there's something that adds to that to interject another voice into the speech or to the sermon, for example, I think.
Yeah, bringing in things like that just always adds value.
Yeah,
it
absolutely.
really does. And there'll be some that will take that and they'll look into that.
Yeah,
Not
sure.
everybody, but some.
If nothing else, I'm just thinking it's refreshing because their style will be different from mine.
Yes.
And the congregation hears me all the time, but to even, to read a brief or even extended quote is just interjecting a different style into the conversation, which is nice.
It is. It shows you've considered other things.
Yeah,
which
absolutely.
is good.
So we've talked about the files and the filing system that you had in the past and how that sort of migrated over into the digital age.
Yeah.
I'm thinking I'm sort of analog versus digital. Anything else we need to say on the analog side or in the background before we sort of move forward a little bit in how you do it these days?
I'm still more of the old school, and you are too, I know. We love our physical.
I like to hold the book. Yeah.
There's so much value in that. And, to market. And I think just holding it and knowing where to go into it when you pick that volume up and there's a favorite quote, you can go right to it. But there's great value in the digital side.
Right.
I get that. And we can bookmark there and we can mark quotes and make notes. We're really blessed.
Yeah, we are.
To have best of both worlds.
First world
with that.
problems, that's for sure.
That's right.
Yeah, I do, and Brad McNutt, who hosts the book club on TLN, and we talk about paper books versus digital books. And you can't argue sometimes with the cost effectiveness of digital books at times, not always. Searchability, right? I'm thinking, though, that sometimes we just skip steps because, to your point a minute ago, I may highlight or mark up a page and then scan that in and put it into a digital filing system. Whereas I may be reading a book in my Bible software and I may make some notes or highlight. And basically, I've just skipped the step of having to scan it in and put it into a filing system, right? It's already there. But ultimately, we're doing the same thing no matter what.
We are.
I agree, though. There's still a lot of value in paper books.
There is. And I think I didn't come prepared really to think a lot about that. But there's to word this the best way, but there's a physical connection, if you will, or there's just a connection to something physical.
Right.
And I know, I love to have my books arranged a certain way in my study. Things that I want to be able to look over and see.
Yes.
Because there's memories there. There's also study of using those in the past. The story, I don't know if you may have heard it, and I haven't read it in a long time, but of J.W. McGarvey, when he was going to make an overseas trip, and he was going to be gone for several months back in that time.
Yeah.
And I think he was going to the Bible lands, actually. That when he was living in Lexington, the story's told that he went into his library and said something to the effect of, kind of goodbye, old friends, or he just spent a little time in there reflecting on his books that he spent every day with.
Yeah.
before he left on that trip. So that kind of says something, right? That there's a connection.
Right.
It's your tools.
Right. That's it.
I guess it'd be like anybody, or a carpenter, or any kind of whatever business you're in. These tools you use every day, you know them.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree.
And
And ideally, I think for me, I would have both. That doesn't.
Yes.
It's economically, that's not always the way it works out, and I don't
Right.
want to be wasteful in that way. But to have a digital companion to the physical would be really helpful.
It's a great blessing.
Yeah. Okay. So, where do we go from here? Do you want to get into maybe some of the practices that you have then? I know you've talked about that a little bit, or where should we go next?
That's fine.
Yeah.
Like gathering quotes each week.
Yes.
Right now, what drives it is what's largely on people's minds in the news. And so a lot of that just automatically comes to the top, right, of the surface, and you're able to see things and find things fairly easy. But then going through, like I said, reading through, is this something that I benefit from? Would this be something others are going to benefit from? Or is there some things in here that there's just a little too much things that are off? I don't want to share that. Here's a nugget.
Yeah.
But yet over here some things, and I struggle with that sometimes, and I'll err on the side of I'm not going to share that.
Yeah, of course.
I'll save maybe that quote, right, for something else.
There may be a way to repurpose the thought.
Exactly, and use it some other way down the road. But like I said, Evernote is my go-to. I also save a lot of things now in my notes because they sync, the Apple Notes. I love that.
Yeah, it's nice.
My little note for this podcast is on the notes,
Yeah,
so
I'm using notes as well at
syncing
this moment. Yeah, it's pretty cool.
I don't use it all the time for that, but
Yeah.
there are certain things I'll just make a quick note,
Gotcha.
go back to this, see this.
So pro and cons on the digital filing cabinet, right? I mean, back in the day when you had your 12 filing cabinets with 5 or 6 drawers each, there came a time when that hanging file was too full and you had to go out and purge.
Yes.
We rarely have that problem digitally.
Right.
Evernote, depending on if you pay for the version, you may have virtually unlimited storage for those clippings. And I mean, we're talking minimal file size electronically. Apple, people joke they're constantly getting the notification on an iPhone, your iCloud storage is full. I pay for iCloud storage, and I like the photos syncing and that sort of stuff. Notes is a part of that. I mean, we're talking unlimited virtually. We have to be discerning because, again, that principle of what's the point of having it if I'm not going to use it, or if I don't know what it is that I have.
That's right.
The process you just described, could this be helpful for another person, that sort of thing? Is that sort of how you discern what you're going to clip or save? Or do you have a process where you go through and evaluate what you have every so often? Or how do you do that?
Yeah. So each week, as I'm doing like trending topics, I will save. And so it's pretty easy to go back to the previous date, to go back to last Tuesday, right?
You're kind of organizing that by week in that sense.
For that. And but there's things within that I'll come across that I'll save that's not to share with out here. This is for me to maybe work on a sermon or a Bible class or an article, or it's just a good article to keep, that I can refer to later.
So how do you organize that? Do you have like a future sermons kind of folder, or how do you do that?
I do. And the use of tags is just so invaluable there. And
when you were building your tags system, I did the same thing a few years ago. I went through Evernote and I said, okay, I'm going to build a whole system of tags that basically, for me, it mimicked the folders that I used to have.
Exactly.
Is that how you did it too?
Yeah.
Okay.
Because you used to be, so you'd have, I was thinking about, like, say you have an article on the baptism of Jesus.
Yeah.
Well, I used to be able to, I'd file that under baptism and under Christ.
But you'd have to make two
if it
copies.
was a real good article.
Yeah.
If it was a real good study.
But would you have to have 2 copies, right?
I would.
Okay.
So you'd go to the copier, you'd copy it, drop them in.
That way it's in either, depending on what you're looking through.
Yeah. And then every now and then there would be one of those that you put in 2 or 3 folders and you couldn't find it.
None of the 3 that you chose were,
I can't come up with it. And sometimes I'll do that here with a digital file. And maybe I have a file on my MacBook too.
Yeah. Okay.
That if it's something that I'm going to need to get to. But I have an A to Z on my MacBook now.
Oh, good.
Of old scans.
Yes.
And even new stuff that you do, that you write or use. I'll drop it in the appropriate folder
in
for
digital
that.
folders.
In digital folders.
So like in Evernote, to your point, you can tag multiple. You can tag one article multiple tags,
Right,
which is
right,
pretty cool.
which is nice.
Very nice, and that's sort of unique in Evernote, the ability to tag like
It
that.
is.
I think you can organize some in notes now. That's sort of a fairly new thing, but again, that's a folder system.
And I've made a bunch of folders, but it's pretty easy to search in there.
I use sort of two main things, just me, and that's I use Evernote some. I like the clipping plug-in in Safari or Chrome or whatever. And then I'll also use, like you said, just on my Finder on my Mac, I've got an outline/data folder, and it's A to Z. And I also have folders for each book of the Bible in there, so I may have first, second, third John, that sort of stuff, and drop it in there. But I like the versatility of that. It's harder to be so versatile, like in the Notes app, for example. You got to drag things in or whatever.
Right.
Whereas if I got an image, if it's a PDF, if it's a text document, I can just pop it in a folder on my Mac, and it's no big deal. That's kind of why I chose that direction.
Yeah.
Does that sort of mirror how you do it?
It does.
Any differences between us on that? Yeah.
And, if I'm just getting a quote, I will just screenshot that, not screenshot, but just clip that quote, and save it in Evernote.
Gotcha.
Or sometimes screenshot, but that works really well.
Yeah. So searchability then is the name of the game for you if you're wanting to recall that, right? I mean, let's say that there's an article that you saved and appropriately tagged or whatever, maybe a year and a half ago. And today you're, maybe writing or thinking or preparing to preach or teach on that topic. You have no recollection necessarily of that article, but the searching is going to pull that up before your mind.
It will.
Okay.
It will. Generally the same thing, through the tag or doing some searching.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or on my MacBook or going to the A to Z file if I know.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this is about the baptism of Jesus. So you might search baptism, you might search Jesus, and it comes up.
Exactly.
Something like that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Wow. If there's a guy and maybe he's saying, I'm not the most organized person, is that sort of how you'd recommend that he begin? Maybe just think of topics and go through and make tags or folders. There's a variety of ways, I suppose, that you could get potential topics under which you could file things.
Right.
Some of that might happen organically, angels, heaven, hell, whatever. And others of that might be, I know years ago I came across a list. I've mentioned it on the podcast before. Billy Smith shared it in preparation and delivery of sermons at Freed Hardeman. It wasn't original with him. Preaching the whole counsel of God was at the top. And there, A to Z, apostasy, angels, whatever, all the way down through the zeal at the end.
Right.
And I just went through and made tags of each of those just as a way of getting started. And, wound up with maybe 50 different tags that I could potentially file things under, which was helpful too, because sometimes it's hard to know, okay, what would I even call this in one word? Have some kind of system in place is kind of nice. Elaborate on that. What else would you recommend?
I think start basic and just don't get overwhelmed, because we all have stacks of stuff, and files and books. And if you're reading a physical book or and you come across a quote, it's one thing to put a bookmark in it, but use your phone. Snap a picture of the quote or the page or the chapter, or open your notes and say, okay, here's, I'm reading Wayne Grudem on his book that's this thick on ethics, and it's on this page. Here's a quote on this. A funny thing the other day, I pulled that book off. I've also got it in logos.
Yes.
There are certain things, that's a whole nother discussion maybe, but if there's a book you're really going to rely on and maybe use some quotes, well, that's wonderful having it in a digital format that you can go in and cut and paste a quote or use it or do searches, that way.
And then Logos will cite it for you, which is fantastic.
Oh, yeah. And as you told me, there's a whole nother world that you've got podcasts for on that.
Yeah.
But so I was reading a certain section. Well, he cites a journal article. And so, wow, I mean, this was good on the topic. And so I went online, found the journal article, and I saved it. I clipped it, saved the whole thing. This is a side note. When you're reading, don't overlook those type trails.
Yeah.
And in a lot of podcasts, or I mean, not podcasts, but blog posts, you'll be reading and there'll be something highlighted. And it could be to another study or a previous article or something related to that. Check that out.
Yeah.
I've been amazed at what I find that just opens up that topic, or here's another view of it, or here's where they're coming from.
Yeah.
And so try to save that. But just making an A to Z file, getting back to our point, to me is one of the most basic, easy ways of doing that.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree.
Dropping things
And
in.
it was helpful to me to have just sort of a system in place that it was already existing, even if originally I didn't have anything in some of those folders at first.
Right.
But just to know, it
Yeah.
helps me think through
Yeah.
different topics that may be pertinent,
And used to be with the old file cabinet system, I would have a huge section. You could fill folders with just Christ.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Well, and I did one file, number 2, number 3. Well,
Right.
what's in there?
Yeah.
And now I knew there used to be a way some preachers would use index cards, and they'd have an index card file, and they would go through and label each one.
Right.
That wasn't a road I wanted to go down.
And the time that stuff takes.
would take.
Right.
So I began breaking it down, like I said. So behind the file on Christ, baptism of Jesus,
Yeah.
his resurrection, his
Right.
ascension, and have those in order.
Yeah.
Well, you can do that with your digital files too.
Right. Well, and you think,
Break it
proofs
down.
of Christ, prophecies regarding the Christ,
No end, his birth.
Yeah. It goes on and on and
Yeah.
on. Yeah.
And so, but you can easily do that with your digital files and go right to it when you need it.
That's helpful.
Yeah.
It's really good. So obviously all this is predicated upon the fact that you're doing a lot of reading, right? And I can't imagine any preacher not doing just a lot of reading
Right.
in preparation for different things. And what your definition of a lot may vary from another person's, and you
Sure.
understand that.
Sure.
So there's a time component invested in that. Having the freedom to chase the breadcrumbs, as you just mentioned, here's a link to another article, or here's a footnote to another journal or something that I want to check that out. Having that freedom to do that, indicates that I'm not pulling a Saturday night special here, right? I mean,
Exactly.
I'm going to take the time
Yeah.
to invest in that. But I'm also thinking the time investment is required in maintaining all of this a little bit.
It is.
And you mentioned some of that.
Yeah, and I think you get into a routine. Once
Okay.
you get a routine down, it's not as time consuming as you might think.
Yeah.
And there's times that use your whatever prime time you have to study. If it's early in the morning or late at night or mid afternoon, whatever your time is,
Yeah.
keep that. In an off time that you need a break,
Yeah. When the brain's not working as well.
do your organizing.
Yeah.
File your things.
Gotcha.
Use that time, and it's beneficial to you. And then you're not using your most valuable special time that you need to read or think.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, I'm with
just
you.
another thought, to get it done.
Yeah.
Right.
About 3 p.m., my brain hits the wall.
There you go. Yeah.
Now, at 6 a.m., I feel like I'm operating on optimum efficiency.
Right.
But 3 p.m., I hit the wall.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
It's organization time.
Yeah. Yeah. Put some music on or something and do some organizing.
That's right.
Yeah.
Keeping the best of the best, right? Or maybe rotating. As we grow, things that once seemed earth-shattering to us may not seem so earth-shattering anymore.
Exactly.
So do you take the time to purge out? Do you keep some of those things? What's your philosophies or practices on some of
and
that?
again, that's a learning process over the years.
And it'll probably be subjective a little bit, too.
It is. And there'll be things that you have purchased or acquired just for a certain project that you realize, okay, I've used it, got all I can out of it.
Yeah.
I can let it go.
Gotcha.
And you may still have some quotes put away that you can refer to.
Yeah.
But as far as maybe the book or the article, you can let it go. Same with in a digital way.
Gotcha.
And I think that's important.
Yeah.
Terry Varner, I remembered his library was in his basement, huge basement.
I was about to ask about that. He said it was a very
it
extensive
was a
library.
full basement, and it was full. And he had rows like in a library, shelves
Wow.
that you would walk through, But upstairs, he had a little office, just a bedroom. Well, he would bring up whatever he was working on that pertained to what he was writing or working or teaching in a class or a sermon series. And he'd have that up there. And when he was done with it, he'd put those back
Take
in
it
his
back.
library, bring up another bunch of things. And if I can, I wanted to throw in this about libraries.
Oh, yeah.
He instilled in me, and Bob Stapleton did too, the great value of your library's research capability. And I think a lot of people don't fully understand that aren't in the preaching realm. But I think we generally do that. Again, it's a go-to. It's where I can go and find answers to questions that I have about the Bible and about religious things and culture and whatever. But think of that as you're adding to your library, the research capability. It's one thing to go out here and read things that are popular at the time. They're not really something you're going to keep and get a lot of value out of later.
Yeah.
Certain things. Now, it's okay to read that and be on top of that. But when you're thinking of adding and building a library, that was always instilled in me. Put research tools in there that you will go back to all the time.
Serve you for a long time.
And some heavier stuff, right? Some research things, and whether it's word studies, encyclopedia type things. And of course, a lot of that we have access with our Logos and other Bible programs and online. You can look at the commentaries for free that you can access online in studies. But that was always a big part of my buying. And I think there were times that I didn't stay on top of what was really popular out here because I was focused more on just a deeper research of Bible study. You know what I mean?
So, and the top 10 books, right, in any given month come and go, right?
They do.
They wane.
They do.
And so even if you're, looking at the latest published books, even in the realm of religion and Christianity, those aren't, most of them aren't really going to endure all that long, right?
Exactly.
I mean, there might be okay. To your point though, something that'll really stick with you and being a little more judicious maybe in adding to the library.
And we know the type things they are. They're popular at the moment, and there'll be a few gleanings you can get out of that. But it's not something that there's no footnotes in it. There's no bibliography. They've not done it's just a surface book more or less. But you mentioned Wayne Jackson.
Yeah.
But when you get a volume from him, wow,
can't go wrong with Wayne
That's
Jackson.
something you're going to refer to and that you want to have in your library.
Well,
and there's a lot of others like that, as we know. But good illustration of him.
Yeah, that's really good. You learn over time this, and all of us preachers, especially, preachers that I know some preachers think, well, hey, I'm nearing the end of my ministry or something. I may be retiring soon. They're not going to change their forms and functions, but the rest of us are in the digital age. We have to think about the way these tools can help us out a little bit.
We do.
And over time, I think we'll all learn, and I'm constantly flip-flopping between digital and whatever, physical. I think about when I first started, somebody gave me the big Strong's Concordance, right? And that was all well and good, and I used it for a little while when I was first getting started.
Sure.
I don't really have a lot of use other than a big paperweight or maybe a doorstop for a Strong's Concordance in my library. That's better in the digital form.
It is.
Or, mayes like it that are maybe a little more meaty now are better in a digital form than they were in book form. So that'll come and go, right?
It will.
Figure that out a little bit.
Oh, yeah. And there'll be things, and I can just picture in the past, a table like this and just books spread out.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And you're doing one study of something, and so you're open this to this and this to this. But and you can still have that today, but there's just an advantage on, like you said, on the concordance type things or word studies.
Word studies.
What a wonderful advantage we have.
Yeah.
Today with those digital tools in that realm.
Yeah.
So definitely using the best of both worlds.
Yeah. Wow.
We're fortunate.
Good stuff. Wow. Research, organizing Gleanings. This is such a neat conversation. I think it's a needed conversation. We're talking very niche down shop today. And if you are not a preacher, I know sometimes, some ladies will say, hey, I listen to the podcast just because I like to hear y'all's conversations. If you've stuck with us for the last 40 minutes, then good on you. But the rest of us, though, I like to talk about this kind of thing. It's actually a little thrilling to me. So
I'm excited about it.
Call me a nerd, but that's where that is. So that's good stuff. What else do we need to say as we sort of begin?
I just saw a word here. I wanted to just say a quick statement about documentation.
Okay.
I think it's important. That was instilled in me as well, to whenever you're studying and you're going to use something, even if you don't publish it or something, have the documentation for it. Know who wrote it, who said it, where it's at.
Where to get it.
It's going to just come in handy for you down the road. Maybe you do go to use that in a bulletin article, in a sermon. instead of just saying, here's what so-and-so said. Somewhere in the fine print, you could at least have.
Yeah.
And we like to see that, because we
Yeah.
want to maybe check that out,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And so
I'm thinking in the copy and paste world, or you take a screenshot or you snap a picture on your phone, it does take a little extra effort to say, okay, here's where this is from.
It does.
But it is important to be able to trace that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And different styles of study or research, it just comes in handy.
Mm-hmm.
But always try to document your sources.
Good stuff. Absolutely. Yeah. We're talking about organizing gleanings from your reading. We'll ask for final words or anything else we need to add before we go here in a minute. But let me just remind you, Preachers in Training is a part of The Light Network, a network of podcasts designed to encourage your soul, enlighten your mind, and empower your faith. You can find Preachers in Training every Thursday from thelightnetwork.tv. And if you enjoy the podcast, by all means, hit the subscribe button so you never miss an episode. We also have a YouTube channel, and some of you are watching this very episode. Preachers in Training and a few of our other podcasts right now are migrating to a video format in addition to our audio format. Go to youtube.com and search for The Light Network or Preachers in Training or my name, Robert Hadfield. Any of those will be a means by which you can access this podcast. And as I mentioned, we have quite a few of the video versions now that are available for you on youtube.com. Don't forget to check out the other shows that are available on our website, thelightnetwork.tv. Steve Miller joins us, SteveMillerWorldview.com, organizing gleanings from your reading. What do we need to say, just departing words for today?
I was just thinking about that. Encourage everybody, use what works for you.
Yeah.
As we read and study and hear interviews and read things, and we find out, and I love to read about how do other people study?
Yeah.
How do they organize things?
Yeah.
I always do, and you pick up pieces, but in the end, do what works for you, where you can get the most out of what time you have and what resources you have, and you don't have to be like somebody else, but just use what's at your fingertips.
That's sound advice. So much I get in my own head, I wonder if that's the way this would do or that would do or whatever. Doesn't matter. Just do it.
Do it.
Yeah.
Get the most out of it
and
you
be
can.
flexible to iterate as you need to, augment as you need to.
Yeah. But I think, and the key with that is always being willing to learn.
Yeah. Good
that
thought.
characteristic.
Sort of undergirds everything, doesn't it?
It really
this conversation
does. That's
today.
what all this is about. Yeah. Trying to learn more.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Thanks, Steve, for being on the episode today.
Thanks for having me today. I've enjoyed it.
Thank you for being a part of our podcast. Hey, listen, if you're ever in the Charlotte area, stop by and see us at the Church of Christ at Gold Hill Road. Chances are either Steve or I will be preaching, so we'd love to see you.
Sure would.
Let's go preach the word.